Today's gonna be a good day. Finally, we have another TV to review. It took a while to get in, but it's here, and it's a good one, too. Unfortunately, I had to go and screw up my finger. I'm not flipping you off, by the way. That's just how this is, so don't feel like I'm flipping you off throughout the video. This is gonna make the unboxing a little bit precarious, but you know what? We were looking to change up our unboxings anyway, so I think we're gonna be just fine. This is gonna be a fun one. Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Caleb Dennison, and today we're looking at the Sony A8H OLED television. It does not replace the A9G OLED from last year. That's still around. It's still considered the flagship. It is not part of the Master series, so we're going to talk a little bit about that later. Also have to talk about HDMI 2.1, or the lack of it, and is that really a big deal? You might be surprised by what I have to say about that too. But before we get to any of that stuff, we need to unbox this sucker and set it up and see if it looks any different than the OLEDs that we've seen from Sony in the past. Here's everything that comes in the box. You've got your product literature, a zip tie for cable management, batteries. Hey, a new remote. It's not that new. It looks a lot like the original Sony remote, so don't get too excited. There is a microphone up here, which does more than just call up your favorite Google Assistant. Power cable, and then really nice legs. These are 100% metal. They're just coated with a little bit of plastic, and they're very robust. And there's a little bit of a trick with these. So you know those quick start guides or setup guides that I'm usually flippantly and even callously just tossing away? Don't do that. You're actually gonna need this. And the reason why is because the stand is adjustable. So basically, you have two options. You can have it slung really low right next to your media cabinet, or you can remove a couple of screws, stack a part on top of the legs, and then attach them. And what that does is elevates the TV enough that you can put a sound bar down there and it's not gonna block any of the screen. We're not gonna do that. It would take way too long. We're just gonna go with the low slung look, but I wanted to take a second to explain that that's how that works. Here are those two screws that you would have to pull out if you were going to elevate the television. But if you're not going to, it's as simple as taking the stand and shoving it right in, and it locks in fairly well, but you're also able to remove it pretty easily too. So that's pretty solid. Man, one of these days I'm gonna unbox an OLED TV and be ho-hum about it, but this is not one of those days. This is a really attractive television. Obviously it's extremely thin, and I do like the legs on this. The low slung look is great, but I think one of the best things about this TV, the Sony logo, down here, it's super stealth. You barely even see it. Certainly not all silver and right in the middle of the panel. Before you even turn it on, I mean, it's a really attractive television. We do need to turn it on, but before we do, I want to mention there are 4 HDMI inputs on this television, one of which, number 3, as it turns out, has EARC, or eARC, so you can get Dolby Atmos through ARC. Also tightens up some of the latency problems that we've seen in the past between the picture and either the soundbar or receiver that you connect it to. That's going to be addressed. So that's wonderful, but that's it for HDMI 2.1 related benefits. You're not going to get variable refresh rate with this TV. There isn't technically an auto low latency mode, excuse me, but you know, it does have a feature where it can detect that it's seeing a gaming signal and switch over. We'll dig into that in just a little bit. Let's get this thing started. So we are running the latest version of Android TV, and there are a few changes. Setup overall is fairly smooth. There's a lot to go through here. So after you're connected to the internet, you're gonna have to accept some terms and some conditions, get through all that stuff. But one thing that is new for this particular television is this audio calibration mode. So we're gonna wanna sit on the couch. You kind of aim the remote control at the TV and let it do its thing. I'll dig into how effective that audio calibration was in the full review video that we'll do a little bit later. But just as a reminder, this TV does have a screen that makes the sound. So you've got 2 actuators in this particular model, one on the left, one on the right. There is a subwoofer built into the back to help reinforce the low frequency sounds. So you are gonna get some fairly well localized sounds from the screen itself, which is something I've been enjoying from Sony's TVs for quite some time. I will point out, however, that this is not equipped to take like the center channel feed from your AV receiver and replace your center channel, right? So if you're gonna surround this thing with a big old speaker system, plan on finding a place for the center channel to work with this TV because it can't do it itself. Once the audio stuff is out of the way, we can start digging into the picture settings. And one thing that you'll notice that's different for this year, Sony added this, is that instead of just having, brightness, contrast, color, it actually has little graphics that pop up when you select each of these things. So if you're not sure what that particular function does before you adjust it, you can learn a little bit about that. For instance, brightness doesn't actually make the screen brighter, it actually raises the black levels up. So you don't necessarily want to go full out with brightness all the time necessarily. So I'm gonna go through this and we're gonna set the TV to custom. That is actually the setting that Sony calibrates to be closest to what director's intent should be. And we'll start by going down. We'll just double check all these settings here, but I know what I want to do is pop into the motion clarity section here, and I'm going to turn that off for now. We're going to experiment that a little bit later, but I don't want to necessarily have soap opera effect right out of the gate. Now I've made some settings adjustments here, not a whole lot. But I don't necessarily know that that's applied to all sources. So you're going to need to spend some time, depending on how much stuff you have hooked up to the TV, customizing the picture settings for each of your sources. And that also includes the streaming apps. So even though I've made the adjustments elsewhere in the TV, if I pop into, say, YouTube here, yeah, you're gonna see that it's in the standard setting right now. So again, I have to make the settings for YouTube specifically. Once that is done, that'll take care of any of the apps that I watch from Android TV. But I do want to pop into Netflix really quick. I'll pull up Ozark because I know that's in Dolby Vision. And yeah, once I go in here, it looks like it's in Dolby Vision Bright mode. I'm fine with that. You could go with Dolby Vision Dark if you wanted to. This is a good time to mention that there is a Netflix calibrated mode. You can turn that on if you want to, but fair warning, a Netflix calibrated mode darkens the picture considerably. And if you're watching in a darkened room, that's fine. But for this particular video, I do not want to turn on Netflix calibrated mode. And by the way, Netflix calibrated mode is only available if you're in Netflix on the app that's built into the Android TV. So you can't connect an external streamer and expect to use Netflix calibrated mode. With all that in place, I also want to mention you're going to need to find a standard HDR10 video on Netflix in order to make sure that you've got the HDR settings the way you want them, because that is very different than Dolby Vision. Well, now that we're up and running and we've got our Sony provided demo footage here, thank you, Sony, there's a lot to talk about with this particular television. Let's start with the fact that it is not a replacement for the A9G because it is not part of the Masters series. What does that mean? Well, Sony tells me that the Masters series gets a little bit of extra calibration at the factory. I mean, they pre-calibrate all of these televisions, but the Masters series just gets that extra little bit of love. With that said, this does have the X1 Ultimate processor. It's got the best processor that Sony makes, the same that you would find in the A9G OLED. And that really does mean something. Sony's processing is everything about why this TV looks the way it does. There are a lot of advantages to that, not just AI upscaling, but Sony televisions do a remarkable job of removing banding or contouring, which you get with low bitrate content. I'm talking about your streaming stuff. So in wide areas of color like this, you would frequently see, pixelation, blockiness, or actual bands between the colors because there's not enough color information coming from the streaming service. Sony does the best job with that, which I think is really important for people who stream a lot of content, especially if picture quality is your #1 concern. Now let's talk about the fact that this TV does not support HDMI 2.1 fully. In fact, EARC is the only feature that is listed under HDMI 2.1 that the TV does support. A lot of folks think that's a big deal. I've seen your comments in the comments section. Why spend so much money on a near flagship TV and not get, something that we would consider like a future-proofing feature? Well, the fact of the matter is that a lot of HDMI 2.1 is geared toward gamers, variable refresh rate being chief among them. Also auto low latency mode, which is great for playing games. Sony does not see this TV necessarily appealing to gamers. They are targeting cinephiles. They're targeting a relatively small audience, one which wants the very best picture quality they can get. So Sony told me this. They put all of their R&D, all of their time, money, resources, parts around making the very best picture quality they can. If you're not familiar, Sony has this true RGB OLED mastering monitor, the BVM 300. It's ridiculously expensive, and it's used in Hollywood to master a lot of movies. Sony wants the AAH to look as much like that mastering monitor as it possibly can. So again, they're targeting the cinephile, not the gamer, and they frankly don't think it's such a big deal that it doesn't have full spec HDMI 2.1. I'll let you be the judge of that. Another really important aspect of this TV, it's got that chip that can handle Android TV the way it should be handled. Just like the A9G, it's super fast at getting through all the different apps. It loads the apps very quickly. This TV is a pleasure to use, whereas with other Android TVs, it's usually very frustrating. In addition to some of the processing stuff that I mentioned earlier, Sony has some proprietary tech built into this TV. Pixel contrast booster, for instance, which chooses where to put the energy in the TV to get the best HDR highlights. It also does a lot of dual database analyzation in order to make sure that it's upscaling the stuff that needs to get upscaled and not upscaling stuff that you wouldn't want. For instance, if you're talking about film grain, and it's been put into the movie digitally on purpose to give it that look, you don't want to enhance the film grain, right? You want to enhance the subject of the image. Sony's processing appears to do that really, really well. And of course, it's an OLED TV, so it's got perfect black levels. But one thing that Sony has figured out that others have been struggling to figure out is how to come out of black in a smooth way so that you get really good shadow detail. We saw some really great performance out of the A9G. I expect to see it in the A8H. So what we're talking about is really a flagship level OLED that costs a little bit less than Sony's actual flagship OLED, with all of the goodies built in that you really need for a deeply satisfying experience, especially if you're a hardcore videophile, all in a really sleek, attractive design. So without getting all the way into a full review, I've got to say this TV looks absolutely gorgeous. If you're hung up on HDMI 2.1, if you want those gaming features, this is not the TV for you. But if you're looking for the best possible picture quality that you can get for watching movies, for streaming Netflix and Hulu and all that good stuff, this is definitely a TV to take a really close look at.